Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside, blanketing the streets and rooftops in pristine white. Inside the small, warmly lit cabin, the fireplace crackled, sending golden flickers dancing across the walls. The scent of pine and burning wood filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of hot cocoa that had been freshly prepared. Elena wrapped herself tighter in the oversized knit blanket draped over the couch, feeling the warmth seep through her chilled fingers. She had come to this remote cabin to escape the noise of the city, to find a little peace and quiet, and perhaps to find herself again. Life had been hectic lately, leaving her craving this kind of solitude. A soft knock on the door startled her. She glanced up, startled, then realized it was Lucas, the caretaker of the cabin. He had been there for years, ensuring guests felt at home, though he himself had always preferred quiet observation over conversation. Tonight, however, his dark eyes seemed to hold something different, something unspoken. "Evening," he said, voice low and smooth, brushing a snowflake from his shoulder. "I thought you might like some company by the fire." Elena smiled politely, gesturing to the empty armchair across from hers. "That's very kind of you. I didn't expect anyone to stay so late." He sat down, removing his coat with a careful, deliberate motion. The firelight caught the subtle angles of his face, highlighting the faint stubble along his jaw and the warmth in his gaze. There was something about him that made her pulse quicken, though she didn't fully understand why. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the crackling fire filling the gaps between words. Elena's eyes wandered to the way Lucas's fingers hovered near his mug, the way his lips curved slightly when he caught her staring. It was an unspoken connection, an electricity that neither of them addressed, but both could feel. Finally, Lucas broke the quiet. "You like it here?" His voice was softer now, almost a whisper, as if sharing a secret with the fire itself. "I do," Elena admitted. "It's peaceful, but a little lonely, I suppose." She met his eyes, surprised by the concern she found there. Lucas shifted slightly closer, and for a moment, the space between them felt charged. "Lonely is what brings people together," he said quietly, almost as if confessing a truth he hadn't said aloud before. Elena felt her heart thrum in her chest, her cheeks warming. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him, caught between the desire to speak and the fear of breaking the fragile tension. Outside, the wind howled softly, rattling the windows, but inside, the world seemed to shrink to the space between the fire and their shared silence. The flickering flames mirrored the unspoken words, dancing shadows over the walls, over their faces, over the possibilities that hung in the air. Lucas reached for the small stack of firewood beside the hearth, and Elena noticed his hand tremble ever so slightly, not from the cold, she realized, but from the same anticipation she felt in her own chest. He knelt beside the fire, feeding it another log, and the glow reflected in his eyes, making them look almost golden. As the night deepened, Elena felt herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. It was a whisper of something more, something that promised warmth, intimacy, and a connection she had been craving without knowing it. And as their eyes met once again, she realized that this winter evening, this crackling fire, and the quiet words between them were just the beginning of a story neither of them had planned but both were eager to explore. The fire's glow painted the room in shades of amber and gold, flickering across Elena's face as she sipped her hot cocoa. The warmth spread through her hands and chest, a gentle contrast to the cold snow pressing against the windows. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, a soft lullaby for the quiet cabin. Inside, however, her heart raced with an unfamiliar anticipation. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the flames. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought, as if the fire held answers to questions he hadn't yet spoken. Elena noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed lightly against the mug. She wanted to speak, to break the silence, but the right words eluded her. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. "Do you come here often?" Elena smiled faintly, though she felt a small pang of vulnerability. "Not really. Just this once, to escape, I guess. Life's been complicated." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something in Lucas's steady presence encouraged honesty. "I needed a place to think. To breathe." Lucas nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she was saying. "I get that. This place, it has a way of pulling you in, making you notice things you usually ignore. Secrets. Thoughts you hide even from yourself." Elena's heart skipped. There was an intensity in his voice, a weight to his words that made her feel simultaneously exposed and safe. She shifted slightly, letting the blanket slide off one shoulder, and felt the heat from the fire on her skin. She wasn't used to this kind of quiet attention, and yet, it felt effortless, natural, like a melody she had always known but only just begun to hear. I suppose I do hide a lot," she admitted softly, her eyes flicking toward him. "It's easier that way. No one asks too many questions." Lucas's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Sometimes, the right person asking the wrong questions can be terrifying. But sometimes, it's exactly what you need." His gaze met hers, steady and unflinching, and a shiver ran down her spine. They fell into a silence again, but it was no longer uncomfortable. Instead, it was charged, a delicate tension that seemed to stretch and bend the space between them. Elena noticed the way his eyes softened when they landed on her, the subtle shift in his posture as if he were drawing closer, though he didn't move. The wind outside rattled the windows, sending a brief chill through the cabin. Lucas stood, moving to the small shelf of candles near the hearth. He struck a match and lit one, then another, the soft glow mingling with the firelight. "I like the shadows," he said quietly, glancing back at her. "They make everything feel more honest somehow." Elena's breath caught. The words weren't just about the light, they were about them, about the fragile, unspoken connection building in the room. She took a slow sip of cocoa, feeling the warmth spread through her, and found herself daring to look closer at him. The shadows danced across his face, highlighting the curve of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes, and the gentle tension in his lips. "You're very quiet," Lucas observed, tilting his head slightly. "Do you think in whispers?" Elena's lips curved into a small smile, almost shy, almost secret. "Maybe," she whispered, testing the word in the intimate space between them. "Sometimes, the quiet says more than words ever could." Lucas's hand hovered near hers, almost brushing, then hesitated. "I think I like that," he said softly. "The quiet. The whispers. They make the truth feel safer." Elena's pulse quickened. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the space, but the moment lingered on the edge of possibility, fragile and precious. The fire crackled, the shadows shifted, and for a heartbeat, it felt as if the entire world had narrowed to this room, this fire, this quiet exchange that carried more meaning than either of them could voice. She realized then that this winter cabin, this simple evening by the fire, was no longer just a refuge from the outside world. It had become a place of discovery, a place where hearts could speak in whispers, where longing could exist without fear, and where something new, tender, and dangerously enchanting was beginning to bloom. The fire's warmth wrapped around Elena like a familiar embrace, but the chill outside reminded her of the world she had left behind. She traced idle patterns on the mug in her hands, watching the steam curl upward, twisting like secrets in the air. Lucas sat across from her, silent, his dark eyes reflecting the flames, and something in the room felt suspended in time. "Do you ever think about what you've left behind?" Lucas asked suddenly, his voice low, almost hesitant. It wasn't accusatory, more curious, patient, as if he were inviting her into a space she hadn't dared enter herself. Elena's throat tightened. She hadn't expected the question, hadn't expected to reveal even a fragment of her past to someone she had just met. Yet, the intimacy of the firelight, the softness in his eyes, made her feel as though she could. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It's hard not to. Life, it moves so fast, and sometimes you just need to pause and remember who you were or who you wanted to be." Lucas nodded, leaning back slightly, but his gaze never wavered. "I understand that," he said softly. "I've learned that hiding from the past only makes it louder when it catches up with you. Sometimes, you have to face it, even in whispers." Elena's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Whispers again," she said. "You seem to like them." "I do," he replied, voice almost a whisper itself. "They carry more weight than words spoken loudly. And sometimes, they're the only way to say what truly matters." There was a pause, filled only by the crackling of the fire and the faint hum of the wind outside. Elena felt a surge of courage, fragile but insistent, pushing her to reveal a piece of herself she had long kept hidden. I left a life behind," she confessed quietly, almost to herself. "A life where I thought I knew everything, but I didn't. And I've been trying to figure out who I am, without all the noise." Lucas's expression softened. He stood and moved closer to the fireplace, crouching slightly as he added another log. The flames flared, illuminating the intensity in his eyes. "That's brave," he said. "To step away, to search for yourself. Not everyone has the courage to do that." Elena felt a warmth beyond the fire, a stirring in her chest she hadn't anticipated. "And you?" she asked softly. "Did you ever have to leave something behind?" He hesitated, then finally met her gaze, the flickering light revealing a shadow of vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I did," he admitted. "And sometimes, I still carry it with me. But places like this, they make it easier. They let you breathe, let you decide what's important. And sometimes, they bring you people who help you remember who you really are." Their eyes held for a long moment, the silence between them heavy with unspoken understanding. Elena's heart thudded in her chest, a rhythm matching the fire's crackle. She wanted to reach out, to close the space between them, but the hesitation, the thrill of uncertainty kept her rooted. Lucas finally moved slightly closer, the distance between them shrinking, not just physically but emotionally. "I've never met someone who listens the way you do," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's rare. And it matters more than I can explain." Elena swallowed, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. "I think, sometimes it's easier to share with someone who doesn't judge," she whispered. "Someone who doesn't expect answers, just presence." His hand hovered near hers, trembling slightly, as if testing the boundaries of the moment. "Presence," he echoed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I can do that. I can be here. If you let me." A shiver ran through her, the combination of the fire, the closeness, and the intensity in his eyes creating a tension that was almost unbearable. And yet, it was sweet, tender, the kind of tension that made the air between them feel alive, full of possibility. Elena's hand twitched, the impulse to reach out battling with her hesitation. Finally, she allowed her fingers to brush the edge of the blanket he had wrapped around his shoulders, a small, tentative gesture that spoke volumes. Lucas's eyes softened, and he didn't pull away. Instead, he let the moment linger, unspoken words dancing between them like sparks from the fire. Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent and steady. Inside, the cabin seemed to pulse with a quiet intensity, a promise of secrets yet to be shared, of connections yet to be deepened. And in that fire-lit room, with the wind whispering against the windows, Elena realized that sometimes, the first confession spoken softly, in whispers was only the beginning of something far greater. The night deepened, and the cabin seemed suspended in its own quiet world. The wind outside moaned through the trees, rattling the windows with a soft insistence, while inside, the fire crackled and cast flickering shadows across the walls. Elena sat on the couch, her blanket gathered around her shoulders, and watched Lucas as he moved with quiet purpose, tidying the room, arranging small things she hadn't even noticed. There was a comfort in his presence, a steady calm that contrasted with the storm of thoughts and emotions she carried. And yet, beneath that calm, she could sense something else, a tension, subtle but undeniable, an unspoken current that connected them. Lucas glanced at her, catching her gaze, and his lips curved in a small, knowing smile. "You're quiet tonight," he said softly, settling back into the armchair across from her. "Thinking, I suppose." Elena smiled faintly. "Always," she admitted. "I think too much. About the past, about what comes next, sometimes about people I don't even know that well." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on hers. "People can surprise you," he said. "Sometimes in ways you never expect. Sometimes, they become more important than you ever imagined." Elena's heart skipped a beat. The way he said it, the way his gaze held hers, made her feel exposed in a way that was thrilling and terrifying all at once. She took a slow sip of her cocoa, letting the warmth spread through her, though it did little to calm the heat rising in her chest. For a long moment, they simply watched each other, the fire between them a quiet witness to the growing tension. And then Lucas spoke again, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I feel like I've known you longer than I should have. Like there's something familiar about this about us." Elena's fingers tightened around her mug. "I feel that too," she admitted. "It's strange. I've only known you for a short time, and yet, it feels like I've been waiting for this, waiting for someone who understands without needing explanations." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but inside, the world seemed to shrink to the space between them, to the unspoken connection that pulsed with every glance, every slight movement. Lucas's hand moved, almost imperceptibly, toward the blanket draped across Elena's shoulders. He paused, as if testing his own courage, and then gently brushed it aside, letting the warmth of the fire touch her skin. Elena's breath caught, a shiver running down her spine, but she did not pull away. "I don't want to rush anything," Lucas said quietly, his eyes locking onto hers. "But I also don't want to ignore this, whatever it is between us." Elena's lips parted slightly, the words she wanted to speak trapped in her throat. Instead, she let her gaze linger, conveying everything she felt in silence, the curiosity, the longing, the unspoken desire that had been building over the past hours. He leaned back slightly, giving her space, yet the tension remained, a thread connecting them in a delicate, invisible dance. Sometimes, he murmured, it's enough just to be near someone. To share this moment. To let the fire and the night do the talking. Elena nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. She reached out, almost unconsciously, her fingers brushing the edge of his hand as it rested on the armrest. Lucas's eyes widened slightly, and then softened, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. He did not move away. Instead, he allowed the connection, fragile and thrilling, to linger. Time seemed to stretch, measured only by the crackle of the fire and the rhythm of their hearts. The world outside faded into a blur of snow and wind, leaving only the warmth of the room, the flickering shadows, and the unspoken longing between them. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena. I want to know everything about you. Slowly, if I have to. But I want to know you. Her breath hitched, and she felt her heart swell with a mix of anticipation and tenderness. I want that too, she admitted softly, her voice trembling just slightly. More than I expected to. And in the quiet intimacy of the cabin, with the fire crackling and the wind singing outside, they both realized that the night had changed them. The space between them was no longer empty, it was filled with possibility, with a growing connection that promised warmth, understanding, and something neither had anticipated but both deeply desired. The fire's glow had softened, casting long, golden shadows across the walls of the cabin. Snow continued to fall outside, muffling the world beyond, and inside, the air felt heavy with possibility. Elena sat closer to the hearth, her blanket pulled around her, though the warmth in the room no longer came solely from the fire. It came from Lucas, from the quiet, steady presence that had become a comfort and a thrill she couldn't ignore. Lucas moved to stand near the window, looking out at the swirling snow. He seemed lost in thought for a moment, his profile illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. Then he turned, and his eyes found hers, catching the flicker of light and shadow in her gaze. I never expected a quiet night to feel like this, he admitted softly. Like, it's the only place that matters. Elena felt her heart tighten. She knew exactly what he meant. The outside world, the chaos, the noise, the endless expectations seemed miles away, irrelevant compared to this cabin, this fire, this moment with him. She took a careful breath and allowed herself to lean slightly forward. I feel the same, she whispered. It's like, everything else has disappeared. Lucas's lips curved in a small, appreciative smile. He stepped closer, the air between them thick with unspoken anticipation. Do you ever wonder if moments like this only happen when they're meant to? He asked. His voice was soft, almost a murmur, but it carried the weight of sincerity that made Elena's pulse quicken. I do, she admitted, her eyes locked onto his. I think, maybe some moments are meant to change us. To remind us what's possible if we let ourselves feel. A gentle silence settled, the kind that wasn't empty but full of possibility, of expectation, of something neither of them dared name aloud. Elena's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her blanket, and Lucas noticed, stepping even closer, until the space between them seemed to hum with energy. May I? He asked softly, gesturing toward the blanket draped around her shoulders. Elena's breath hitched, and she realized he didn't mean just the blanket, he meant the space, the tension, the closeness they both felt. She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. Yes, she whispered. Lucas reached out, his hand brushing hers as he gently pulled the blanket from her shoulders. The contact sent a shiver through her, not from cold but from the electricity of the moment. He didn't rush, he simply let the connection linger, eyes searching hers as if asking permission wordlessly. They moved naturally, almost instinctively, toward each other, drawn together by the invisible current that had been building since the evening began. Elena felt her heart racing, her pulse echoing in her ears, but there was no fear, only a thrilling sense of anticipation. "You're remarkable," Lucas said softly, his voice low and intimate, as if speaking the words directly to her soul. "I don't know how, but you've changed the way this night feels." "The way I feel." Elena's breath caught, and she felt her cheeks warm. "I feel the same," she admitted. "It's overwhelming, but in a good way. Like I've been waiting for something without knowing it." The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows over their faces as Lucas reached out, his fingers lightly brushing a strand of hair from her face. Elena's eyes fluttered closed for a brief moment, savoring the sensation. The tension between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, intimate, the kind that made the world fall away until there was only them, only this fragile, beautiful connection. For a while, they simply existed in that space, hands hovering near each other, hearts beating in quiet synchrony, breaths mingling with the warmth of the fire. Words were unnecessary, the silence spoke volumes. Finally, Lucas spoke again, voice low, almost reverent. "I don't want this night to end," he said. "Not yet. Not while it feels like this." Elena opened her eyes, meeting his gaze, and nodded. "Then let's stay here," she whispered. "Let's just be. No expectations. No past. Just now." And so, they did. The snow continued to fall, the fire continued to crackle, and the cabin became a world unto itself, a place of quiet connection, tender longing, and the promise of something more. In the dance of shadows and light, of whispered words and lingering glances, Elena and Lucas discovered that sometimes, the most extraordinary moments are born from the simplest things: warmth, presence, and the courage to let someone in. The cabin was quiet now, the fire reduced to a gentle glow that painted the room in soft amber hues. The snow outside fell steadily, thick and serene, muting the world beyond the cabin walls. Inside, Elena and Lucas sat closer than before, their shoulders almost touching, the space between them charged with a quiet, lingering tension. Elena wrapped her hands around her mug, though she barely felt the warmth. Instead, her heart thrummed with anticipation, her senses acutely aware of Lucas's presence beside her. He was watching her too, his gaze steady, attentive, as though trying to read the thoughts she had yet to voice. "I never imagined a night like this," Lucas said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, intimate, carrying a weight that made Elena's chest tighten. "Quiet, snow outside, firelight, and yet, it feels like it's meant to happen. Like it's been waiting for us all along." Elena looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at him. "It does," she whispered. "It feels right. Even though I've never felt this way before." Lucas shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing hers. The contact was light, almost accidental, but it sent a shiver down her spine. He tilted his head, studying her face. "I've never felt this either," he admitted, voice soft, almost trembling. "And yet, it's as if I've known you far longer than I should have." Her breath caught. The vulnerability in his words mirrored the emotions swirling inside her own heart. She felt a surge of courage, fragile but undeniable. Lucas. She stopped, uncertain how to express the mixture of longing, trust, and hope that had taken root in her chest. He reached out, gently resting a hand over hers. The warmth of his palm against her skin grounded her, eased the nervous flutter in her heart. Elena, whatever it is you were about to say, you can say it? I'll listen. She swallowed, letting the words slip quietly but with conviction. I think I've been waiting for someone who sees me. Truly sees me. And I feel like I've found that with you. Lucas's eyes softened, the flicker of firelight catching in their depths. He didn't move immediately, simply let her words sink in, the silence between them now full of meaning. Finally, he whispered, I feel the same. More than I can put into words. For a moment, they simply held each other in that quiet space, letting the unspoken connection between them deepen. Elena felt a rush of emotions: relief, joy, anticipation, and a tender vulnerability she had kept hidden for far too long. The firelight flickered across Lucas's face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes, the slight curve of his lips that made her heart ache in the best way possible. You're incredible, he said finally, voice low, reverent. I don't know what I expected tonight, but it's more than I could have imagined. Elena's lips curved into a small, shy smile. I feel the same, she admitted. And it's terrifying, in the best way. Lucas leaned closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath, the subtle scent of pine and the fire lingering in the air around him. Terrifying and thrilling, he whispered. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Their hands intertwined naturally, fingers lacing together as if they had always belonged that way. The space between them seemed to vanish, leaving only the shared heartbeat of two people discovering something rare and beautiful. Elena rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his pulse, the warmth of his body, and the quiet strength in his presence. I don't want this night to end, she murmured. Lucas pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, a simple gesture but full of promise. Neither do I, he replied softly. Let's stay here, together, as long as we can. Just you and me, and the fire. Outside, the snow continued its gentle fall, blanketing the world in quiet serenity. Inside, the cabin became a haven of warmth and intimacy, a place where whispered confessions and shared vulnerability created a bond neither of them could ignore. In that glow, Elena and Lucas discovered that the most profound connections weren't always loud or dramatic. They were quiet, tender, and built in moments of trust, presence, and courage. And as the fire crackled softly, shadows dancing across the walls, they both understood that this night these moments would linger in their hearts far longer than the snow outside. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the frost-lined windows, casting a soft glow over the cabin. The fire had burned low during the night, leaving behind glowing embers that pulsed faintly in the hearth. Outside, the world was hushed, the snow shimmering like powdered silver under the early sun. Inside, Elena and Lucas lay together on the couch, wrapped in a shared blanket, still savoring the quiet intimacy of the night. Elena stirred, blinking against the gentle light. The warmth of Lucas's arm around her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, and the soft pressure of his hand in hers grounded her in a way that made the chaos of the outside world seem impossibly distant. She let herself linger there, taking a slow, deep breath, feeling the quiet joy of simply being near someone who truly understood her. Lucas shifted slightly, his dark eyes opening to meet hers. A small, tender smile curved his lips. Morning, he whispered, voice rough from sleep but soft with intimacy. Did you sleep well? Elena nodded, feeling a surge of contentment she hadn't realized she could feel. "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted. "It's peaceful here. With you." Lucas tightened his hold slightly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "I feel the same," he murmured. "I didn't know a night could change so much. But it did, at least for me." Elena's heart swelled. She had feared vulnerability, feared opening herself up again after so much uncertainty, but with Lucas, it had felt natural, safe, and exhilarating all at once. "I'm glad you were here," she said softly. "That you stayed. That we shared this." He leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching, and in that quiet moment, words seemed unnecessary. The silence spoke louder than anything they could say, the warmth, the connection, the mutual understanding that had blossomed between them. "I think," Lucas said finally, voice low and intimate, "that some moments, some people, change the way we see everything. You've done that for me, Elena. I don't want this to end, or even slow down." Elena's fingers traced his hand, marveling at the simplicity of the gesture and the depth of emotion behind it. "Then let's not let it end," she whispered. "Let's take this, and see where it leads. Together." Lucas's eyes softened, a mix of relief and happiness flickering in their depths. "Together," he echoed, the word carrying a promise, a vow, and a quiet determination. They sat for a long while, wrapped in their shared warmth, listening to the soft creaks of the cabin and the distant whisper of snow outside. There was no rush, no need for dramatic declarations or grand gestures. The connection they had nurtured in whispered words, stolen glances, and quiet confessions was enough. It was real, grounding, and infinitely comforting. Eventually, Lucas rose, moving toward the small kitchen to start a pot of coffee, his movements easy and familiar. Elena watched him, feeling a profound sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. When he returned with 2 steaming mugs, their fingers brushed again, and they shared a small, knowing smile. They drank in companionable silence, sipping slowly, letting the moment stretch. The firelight flickered one last time as the sun rose higher, casting a gentle warmth across the room. Outside, the snow sparkled, but inside, the true warmth came from their closeness, their trust, and the quiet intimacy that had grown between them. Elena leaned against Lucas, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never imagined a night like this," she murmured, voice soft and full of wonder. "But I'm grateful it happened. For us." Lucas kissed the top of her head gently. "Me too," he said, almost reverently. "And it's just the beginning. We have everything ahead of us." She smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement and contentment. "Everything," she echoed. And as the morning light filled the cabin, mingling with the fading glow of the embers, Elena and Lucas knew that this night the whispers, the fire, the snow, and the tender closeness would remain in their hearts forever. It was not just an ending or a beginning, but a promise, that connection, understanding, and love could blossom quietly, beautifully, in moments when hearts dared to open. In the stillness, wrapped in warmth and trust, they faced the day together, ready for whatever life might bring, knowing that some moments, some people were worth holding onto forever.